And during that period of time, you had lessons with Schnabel
Well,
for
I
10
came
years.
to him, he invited, when he invited me to become a student, this was in San Francisco, which is my hometown. He invited me to come to where he was living in the summer. He was living in a little town on the Lake of Como in northern Italy, in the Italian-Swiss Alps, a little town called Tremezzo. Yeah, Lake Como. This was long before George Clooney discovered Lake Como. So I worked with him in that summer of 1938, and then things got really hot in 39, and Schnabel left Como and came to New York and made his home there. And I followed him, and then we started regular lessons. He lived, I remember, on Central Park West and 86th Street. It was a hotel called the Peter Stuyvesant Hotel. And he lived on the 9th floor, apartment 9C. I remember very clearly. And the rooms weren't all that large, but one of the rooms he had a Steinway concert grand that the students all played on, and against another wall over there was a little upright Steinway, and he played the upright. And the sounds that came out of the upright were infinitely more beautiful than what we could make on this piano.
What were the sessions like?
Well, first of all, he taught in a different manner, which I've taken over for myself personally also. He only had a small handful of students, 3 or 4, maybe 5 sometimes. But he insisted that everybody be present for everybody else's lessons. And that was just, you can't believe how informative that was. First of all, to see that so many of one's own fears were shared by everybody. You weren't just alone in your own private little hell, as it were, you know? And you got a real leg up on 4 or 5 times as much repertoire. And you began to see how in a sense similar the challenges of different pieces were, and how the solution for one challenge in one piece might be useful for another challenge in another piece. So if you were ever to study a piece that you heard somebody else play in class, you already had something of an idea what it was like. So you developed a kind of overview, and each piece wasn't just, a collection of new tones, new notes. It gives you a whole different approach to music making. And he would not hear the piece 2 times in a row. He would tell you, for example, I remember playing 81A, Beethoven, Les Adieux Sonata. Somebody played it here in class the first day, I think. Was that Alex?
Yes.
Alex Chin, right. His classes were between 2.5 and 3.5 hours long. His lessons, I should say. He heard one person in that time. And I remember I played first movement of 81A, and we started at the beginning of the first movement, not the second movement. And we spent the whole lesson on the opening adagio. We didn't get to the tigaram, we didn't. And not that he was so picky about everything, but he told you everything that he had learned in his lifetime about that piece. So there was a lot to absorb. And, you know, we didn't have recording devices in those days. So I'd be busy scribbling in my music, and he would make fun of us for being so busy writing that we didn't really have time to really hear what was going on. We were just kind of transcribing what he said. And he said, you know, if somebody else here in the studio were to play that piece, I might say different things about it. So the writing really wasn't all that important. But I would stagger out of there after, 3 hours or so, absolutely inebriated. I was drunk. I couldn't retain all that he had said. And I remember when we finally parted ways, when he said, you're on your own now, that sense of loss, because I was sure that I had forgotten 99% of what he had said. And for a couple of years, I was really, after I left him, I was like somebody in the middle of the ocean without a life raft. And then I remember studying a piece. I remember the piece was a Schubert B-flat sonata that I had not worked on with him. But I had, there were certain things that just weren't coming the way I had hoped them. And a little blump went off in my head. And I recollected that he had said something about another piece that was similar, made a suggestion. And I asked myself, maybe that would work here. And sure enough, it did. And then these little blumps, I don't know if you remember, there was a Maxwell House coffee commercial that showed these little bubbles, boiling bubbles. That's the way the things that he said came back to me, and I began to realize I really hadn't forgotten anything that he had said. It was all there, but it was just covered with a lot of, garbage. And I just had to get rid of the garbage to get back to what he told me about. Yeah, that was a big awareness. And then I realized that a few of the things that I remembered and tried as solutions to certain problems didn't work. They didn't really resolve the problems. And I had the idea, well, let me try just the opposite. And that worked. So leave yourself open, no matter how many solutions you find. Might not always work, but be alive, be aware, try other ways, try the opposite. Bless. Okay?